Hello my little psychos, and welcome to episode 3 of the Haunting series of season 2. This episode is a continuation of horror in cinema. We are going to talk a little bit more about different eras than I talked about in the last video. Anyways, let's get into the video. Over the course of a century, horror films have gone through many peaks and valleys, leading us into the period we find ourselves in today. The history of horror as film genre begins with many things in cinema history. That includes the works of George Mills. The literary years. This takes place between the 1900s and the 1920s. After the first horror movie, somewhat between the 1900s and the 1920s, an influx of supernatural themed films followed. Many filmmakers, most of whom still trying to find their feet in the new genre, turned to literary classic as source material. The golden age of horror. This is between the 1920s and the 1930s. Widely considered to be the finest era of this genre, the 2 decades between the 1920s and the 1930s saw many classics being produced and can be neatly divided down the middle to create a separation between the silent classics and the talkies. On the silent side of the line, you've got momentum titles such as The Cabinet of Dr. Corgerel in 1920. Terrible pronunciation, I'm sorry. And Nosferatu in 1922. The first movies to make a real attempt to unsettle their audience. The Atomic Years. This would be in 1934. There was a movie called Freaks, and it was banned for a period in Great Britain. Then the Hammer Horror Company, which we've talked about in depth in the other part, they only started to turn prolific during the 50s, but when it did, it was a global dominant. The gimmicky years were between the 1950s and the 1960s. 3D glasses, electric buzzers inserted into theater seats. They had audiences screaming and pretending to faint. Everything and anything was tried during the 50s and 60s, an attempt to further scare somatic audiences. This also spilled over into other genres during the period, but quickly died down in part due to the massive amount of expenses involved. Because it's not cheap to go the extra mile to scare somebody. For horror in particular, this gave way to the opposite end of the spectrum. Incredibly low budget production. We've all seen a very low budget horror movie before. Some of them are actually fairly good, in my opinion. Let me know what you think. Comment. And the last one is All Hell Breaks Loose. This is between the 1970s and the 1980s. Occult was the flavor of the day between the 70s and the 80s, particularly when it comes to houses and kids being possessed by the devil. The reason for this cultural obsession with religious evil during the period could fill an entire article of its own, but bringing it back into the somatic realm, we can boil the trend down 2 horror milestones. The Exorcist, which came out in 1973, and The Omen, that came out in 1976. The future of horror films present day. Perhaps more subgenres than any other branch of a fictional filmmaking, it's difficult to see how anyone can expand or advance on anything that has come before in cinematic horror. However, there's no doubt somebody will. And that motivation and imagination that film school students become the next Alfred Hitchcocks of tomorrow. Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 3 of season 2 of the Haunting series. This was fun to make. I enjoyed making the first one in season 1. So yeah, it was fun to talk about different eras that I didn't actually talk about in the other one. Also, we are slowly getting to the end of season 2 because there's only 5 in this one, and then we will do another thing for season 3. I haven't planned anything yet, but as soon as I have, I will let you know. Also, if you would like to become a little psycho, please hit that subscribe button. Also, don't forget to ring the bell, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!